everybody, and welcome back to Eggs Podcast. Today's special guest is Adam Callinan, founder and CEO at Pentane. How are you?
Doing great. How you guys doing?
Not
Very
too
good.
bad.
Yeah, thanks so much for making time to visit with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So let's kick this off. Just give a brief interview or explanation of who you are and what you do and your company.
Who I are and what I do are not the same thing. I won't go too far down the I'm a dad, all those things rabbit hole. I know
We love hearing that, though.
That's not what people are probably interested in.
Well, and actually, I will say, if you want to do a little bit of that, and the only reason I say so is because a lot of our the people who listen to this show, we have CEOs, we have startup founders, we have young entrepreneurs, we have all kinds of people that are thinking about getting into business but aren't.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, family and things like that become the excuse for not doing the thing you want to do.
Great.
And so I don't think it's a terrible thing to mention that you've got a family and all that.
That's a great lead in, because you may see that the way I approach things revolves around that time saying. So, to be fair, I am a dad, I'm a husband. Those are the most important things in my life. And they have been for a while. I have a 3 and a 6-year-old, so I've only had them for a little bit, but even in my last company, you can absolutely structure what and how you do it around your lifestyle if you're careful and you don't go and do the things that a lot of other people do, like raise $1 bazillion at a crazy valuation and get on that mousetrap. But Pentane is my current company. I've been in a couple of different startups. I'm sure we'll get into some of that. Pentane's it comes out of my experience as an e-com founder, building scalable, profitable businesses with little to no team, no investment. Pentane is the software application that is built on top of super complicated math and spreadsheets that we ran my last company, Bottlekeeper, on to simplify driving profitability, to simplify growing revenue and operating a consumer brand, that's sub 50 million in revenue, where you don't have like a full C-suite of people that are finance people and marketing people and all this stuff.
Yeah. So no, and I love that just kind of that little moment that you mentioned, just kind of being purposeful in the way that you design your business, because I think there are people, obviously who are looking for the, big VC route, and they're ready to go 90 hours a week to work. But I think there's also people, and this is sort of a conscious decision that we made when we had our kids, was just that they weren't going to be the reason we didn't do whatever it was we wanted to do.
100%.
And so, and it's not saying, hey, you guys are a lesser priority. In fact, it's you guys are a greater priority. We want to make sure that the lifestyle that we have, the travel that we do, the things that we're involved with, like, you guys got to be a part of all that. It's not, okay, well, now we're going to shut off and we'll never see our friends again. And we're just, we're going to take care of our kids. So
you get to make a choice as a parent, and you get to make a choice as a business owner. I don't think they're actually that different. Clearly there's some emotional differences in there, but they're not actually that different. You can be an accessory to their life, or they can be an accessory to yours.
Yeah, but you can't fire your kids.
You can't fire the kid. It's hard.
I don't know. I've been thinking about it.
It's difficult, but that's obviously the way we've approached life and parenting as well. And we have epic kids, I think, probably largely as a result of that.
So tell us about Bottlekeeper. That was you were on Shark Tank, a few other things. Is that kind of what kind of got the thing going for your first go around, was Bottlekeeper?
Yeah. I was in a medical device company before that I sold out of in 2013. My cousin had this idea sitting on the beach in Manhattan Beach for a beer bottle. Actually, this is our original prototype. He literally took a stainless steel water bottle. I don't know if you can see this, if you're not watching the video, you won't be able to see it, but it's a stainless steel bottle that he vice gripped. You can see the vice grip marks, and he hacksawed it in half and cut up koozies in his garage and stuffed them inside. So a beer bottle fit inside. And it was literally, he just wanted to drink a beer on the beach out of a Corona bottle because he's a lunatic and that's what he wants. He doesn't want to drink it out of a party, out of a red Solo cup that's warm in 4 minutes. So he comes up with that idea, and I was now looking for the next thing. I started a venture fund, which was a terrible idea because I hate raising money. Not good for a venture fund. And it sort of fumbled along for a little bit, and then eventually we agreed to come together and do it. But I was really adamant that we build that company without employees. My company before that had 80 people in multiple states and delivery vehicles and warehouses and all this stuff. And it was just really heavy.
Yeah.
So we, that was at a point where you could build scalable tech by linking all these things together. You could use Shopify, or at that point it was kind of WooCommerce. That was the early stages of Shopify. And we did that really successfully. We each put in 10 grand. That was the extent to which we had to invest in the company. It was profitable its first year. In the third year, we got to 8 million in sales, no employees. And this is all before Shark Tank. So by the time we went on Shark Tank, we were way too big to be on Shark Tank, but it was an epic experience. I mean, we did that in 2018. Our trailing 12 months was just over 10 million when we filmed that episode. We got really lucky when we filmed. It was the week before Father's Day, which was like our second biggest holiday. So I was able to like open the thing with some crazy stuff that, like we did $1 million in the last week, like that kind of stuff that blew their minds. But that was a super fun experience. It was great for the company. I mean, it's like the never ending free customer acquisition tool.
So let's talk about, you have the prototype right there. You just showed it to us. Let's talk about R&D and actually getting the product to market.
Yeah.
And then once you have it to market, how did you market it?
So if we back up, I did not think this thing would be a thing. I'm very upfront about that. Like I thought it was interesting and cute and a thing you'd see at Spencer's Gifts for $8, which is not a business.
Sure.
So when we decided to go and kind of dip our toes in the water on that, I wanted to first prove that people would be interested in it before we went and spent any real time or money on doing it. So the first thing I did was I put up a landing page. I shot a video on the beach in front of my house, just with the product kind of in action, and put $500 in Google AdWords and collected emails, and basically just said, are you interested in this? Collect emails. And enough people did it where it was like, okay, fine, next step. So shot some more videos. I did all the stuff myself. I had no idea what I was doing, but you can hack it together. And we did crowdfunding is how we launched the company. That was the only way I could figure out how to get the strangers to swipe their credit cards. Again, it wasn't an expensive company to start. So it was a little bit less about just raising money, although obviously having sales before you've actually sold the product is cool. I wanted to see that we could get people that we weren't related to spend money.
Yeah.
Well, and I suppose by doing the crowdfunding model too, they were able to, I guess that helped facilitate the building or the actual manufacturing process too, right?
It certainly kicked it off. I mean, the crowdfunding thing to us, we figured that if we could sell $5,000 worth of product, that would be enough to say, okay, there's interest in this, at $20 a piece. And we sold 350% of that or something. I think we sold 13 grand worth of product. So we took that money, put it all in patents immediately. And then, we went and found how we did it is we went to Alibaba. We went and found 10 companies that were manufacturing just water bottles in China. Cause that was, we're kind of where you had to do that. We tried to do it domestically multiple times throughout the life of that company and it just couldn't figure it out. But, we found Alibaba, then you go to those companies and we said, we have a thing that we want to talk to you about. Will you sign an NDA, knowing that most of them will not? 7 out of the 10 will not. And I know you hear this thing about NDAs and intellectual property in China not being worth anything, and that's not true. China actually has really, really strict internal intellectual property restrictions. You just have to follow their rules.
Yeah.
So, but we didn't know that at the time, to be fair. I know that now afterwards, but we didn't know that in 2013. I just figured, my cousin and I figured if a company wasn't willing to sign it, that was just a red flag to not start. And if a company was, even if they totally violated it, like at least, they're kind of willing to play the game. And then you take the next step into a big thing with international manufacturing is just being really careful that the people you're communicating with fluently speak your language. Mm-hmm. Because we would deal with, a couple of conversations where we'd ask questions and they would answer in a way that clearly meant they did not understand that we were asking. And that's obviously a problem when you're trying to have something made.
Sure.
So we whittled that down to one company. Another thing was MOQs, minimum order quantities. You have a company that their minimum order is, 50,000 units or 20,000 units. Working with manufacturing, particularly in China, you have to kind of sell we have to start lower, but the next one's going to be a little bit bigger and you have to dangle this carrot forever. It's just part of doing business in China. So we got the last 2 companies, we got one of them to commit to bringing their MOQ down to 1,200 units, which is, what we needed to fulfill in that first order, and had the product made, shipped that first product. We missed Christmas by like 5 days, which was awesome. Shipped it like the first week of January, our first orders, fulfilling all of that prior crowdfunding stuff.
So we've had a few people on this show that one of them is a specialist that actually specializes in being like an intermediary for someone like you who's going to China to get something manufactured. He's got all the connections already there, and he's your local US side person that you would talk to get something manufactured over there. And he seemed like really knowledgeable person, really great guy to work with. Ian Foster's another guy that we've had on the show that he was the founder of CenterCam. He's a guy that he put your webcam in the center of your monitor so you have eye contact with people when you're talking to them on a Zoom call.
Yeah.
And he did the same thing. He used crowdsourcing to sell his product initially. He got the first round made and then went from there. He's on his like version 3 or version 4 at this point now, but he's done over a few million in sales just off of a simple, cool idea like that. And I love watching someone here, I want a jacuzzi for my beer bottle, and that turns into a multi-million-dollar thing. I love those stories, and thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah. That was fun.
Can I ask you a couple things sort of along the way? And this is something that we stumble on a lot. I talk about a lot, and I don't know how to solve this for people yet. So maybe you can help me. So as we were working through this process and just talking about sort of your step-by-step up to that initial launch, some of the things that you said, I don't think are going to be the immediate thing that somebody thinks of. Like, for example, you said that some of the money that you guys had up front went right into patents. I don't know that going right into patents is something that your average, small business owner or person trying to, build a business or something thinks about, right? It makes sense, but it's like things like that make me wonder about sort of your prior experience. Like, where are you getting these kinds of things? Because there's a lot of people out there in the world, including ourselves, because we don't do this perfectly. But I mean, we try and share people's stories. We try and sell or share people's information and how they do whatever they do. But there's this gap between, I guess, hearing something, even reading something, and then doing something.
Yeah.
Right. And so those, I think whatever that is, these mysterious step-by-step part is, I think people need a little bit more hand-holding on that. I think you really get it from experience more than you do from reading it or whatever. And so I wonder, like, patents is just one example of the thought processes you shared, but like the business that you built seems like it was built on sort of a foundation of some sort of sophisticated business knowledge already. Like, was there something earlier in your life? Did you have a relationship with, I don't know, parents who were entrepreneurial? Like, is there some like level of knowledge that you brought to the table when creating this thing that you were leveraging, or did you guys just have a really smart approach?
So I'll separate that into two things. One, if you want to go into patents, I will literally give you the playbook from start to finish, exactly what to do for your startup founders that have an idea and they're not sure where to go. I literally, it's simple. It's really not that complicated. You can do it very inexpensively. I'll tell you exactly how to do it. The second part, so we can come back to that if you want to. We can put it.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be a great topic for people.
The second part, I did have prior business experience. My cousin also had prior business experience. We both got degrees in molecular and cellular biology, which is great and fancy, and that's awesome. But what it taught us to do was solve problems. That's what science and math do. You start at A and you need to get to Z, and you have to figure the stuff out in between. That's what all of math and science is. So we collectively spent 8 years at university doing hard physics and calculus and organic chemistries, all of which that 100% revolve around problem solving. So, using the scientific method and testing hypothesis works perfectly in business. And that goes back to like in Bottlekeeper, the early stages, my hypothesis was I did not believe we could get strangers to pay for this ridiculous product. So we put structure in place to test that. And again, that was also it wasn't my first company and it wasn't Matt's first company. So we had been involved in other things with some amount of success. And a lot of that does actually translate. I mean, now I'm in a software company that has nothing to do with my last consumer product company,
right? But
an incredible amount of the experience that I gained from the 9 years we owned Bottlekeeper translates to what I'm doing now.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I say, I mean, I think that this is the crux of what we're trying to solve is, how can people take what they hear you say and then apply it in real life, right? So we can maybe do a quick tangent on patents and we can talk about that. But I mean, in general, I mean, I think what you're saying is a really right approach. And it's actually a different way that I've heard about it, because most people that come on the show have a business degree from somewhere or whatever. And so it's a little bit different approach. But because honestly, I don't think a business degree teaches you to solve problems in the same way. It might teach you to manage books or, it be a good manager or something. But, I don't think you're getting that type of approach. And I would just say probably, I mean, Mike and I can probably relate. I mean, neither of us are scientists, but the way that we've kind of worked our way through life is by, kind of running into a brick wall and then figuring out our way around it, and so it's kind of the approach you're describing, maybe less eloquent, but,
it's the exact same.
Something like that.
It's literally the exact same. You got to break stuff and you just do it fast, learn fast, move fast. And that's the benefit of being in a startup. That's the benefit of being in an early stage business, is you can do those things quickly.
Yeah.
But you have to do them quickly or you're totally throwing that benefit out the window.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, and I think there are a lot of people that get stuck, and obviously there's a big philosophical discussion here, because I think there's a lot of baggage people bring to business when they try and start a company. And so a lot of it is fear and trepidation and all kinds of other things that keep them from being totally successful. But yeah, no, this is just, it's always been something that I've been trying to work through in my own writing or on this podcast and things like that, where we, man, it's just like, it's one thing to just espouse the knowledge. It's another to actually be able to do something with it. Right. And so anyway, it's a topic I like to dig into. So, but let's take a quick little tangent down patent road. Let's talk about why would we even do it? First of all, in your case, you had a physical invention, but what can we patent? Why would we patent? And how did that work? I assume it probably factored into your eventual exit.
Yeah, it was a huge part of our exit. I mean, we went from nothing to in our acquisition, we had 42 patents, and They were insane. Like, our patent portfolio was epic. Get into specifics on that, but look, like, at the beginning, if you have an idea, let's simplify it and make it a physical product. The first thing that you do is you have to find a patent attorney. Do not call your real estate attorney uncle. Do not talk to the contracts attorney that's your neighbor, who's awesome and probably epic at what he does. Intellectual property is extremely nuanced. They have to specialize in that thing. So that's the number one mistake. Like, don't have your brother-in-law, who's a criminal defense attorney, file trademarks for you. He doesn't understand how it works. So number one. Number two, the first thing that you're going to do is they're going to do a patentability search. They're going to take your thing. They're going to look at it. They're going to find the things that are interesting about that. And then they're going to, for inexpensive, for $1,000, they're going to do a patentability search. Because the first thing you want to know is that you're not actually violating somebody else's patent. That's the first massive barrier, is let's just make sure we're not violating someone else's IP, because that can be painful and expensive. And then, assuming that's not the case, or you might design around that other existing patent, which you can do. I mean, that's a thing that's possible. They'll file what's called a provisional patent. In the patent system, I should have prefaced all this, I'm not an attorney, talk to your attorney. But in the patent system, with patents, they're first to file is who has priority, versus trademarks, which are first to use. So they're different. Like, you can't just file a trademark and whoever filed it first wins. They have to go and do deep searches on the internet to see who used that term in that class a decade ago. And then you have to go get permit. It's a pain in the butt. With patents, it's first to file. So that filing date is really important. A provisional patent allows you to secure that filing date for really inexpensive. A provisional patent will generally cost like $1,500. And what that does is it gives you the ability to take a year and go prove that what you've invented is actually a thing that you can sell, before you go and invest tens of thousands of dollars in real patents and the years-long prosecution it takes to get them through the system, and then the defense of them, which is a whole other thing. So the first step is a provisional patent. That gives you a year to convert that patent or abandon it, generally convert it to a utility patent. So then once you file the utility patent, your law firms, some are great, some are terrible, just like accounting firms, just like doctors, some are great, some are terrible. So use the resources around you to get advice on who to speak with. I'm proud to say that most of our most epic patent prosecution, which is getting the patents, came through Quarles and Brady as the law firm that we used. They were exceptional. The things that they did were outrageous and had a huge impact on the business and the value of the business in the end.
Love it. So let's talk about that. Actually, you were acquired because of the patents. I'm sure that actually made that much more valuable, because you own the product. You didn't have to worry about someone coming out and cloning it and stealing your customer, all that stuff. Can you maybe talk about the acquisition process, why the patents helped, and why you decided to exit? It seemed like a nice cash flow where you didn't really have any employees. That's almost something you could just kind of sit on forever and just have cash flow coming in. But I guess large lump of change versus, just the passive, you got to pick which one you want. maybe just tell us about that process, how you got acquired, the patent in that, and then why.
Yeah, I'll first say that when you get a patent, you have to be prepared to defend it, which is the worst part of a business.
Yeah.
And that happened to us on Amazon in 2016 or 17. Fake Bottlekeeper product called something else, so they weren't violating our trademarks, started showing up on Amazon. And at that point, we were not on Amazon. We were Shopify only, completely direct to consumer, no wholesale. And so we had to go to Amazon. And the process of being able to defend your patents on Amazon is a very rigorous, very expensive. I mean, it took a year, it cost $500,000. We had to sue 10 teeny tiny companies operating these little businesses out of their garage.
Wow.
And with the intent to not to get money from them. It was literally, we wanted
just
them to destroy the
stop.
product.
Yeah.
And they needed to agree with the courts that they were violating our patent. And we needed the court to agree that they were violating our patents. The result of that is called a consent judgment. And a consent judgment is a court order. That's the tool that you need to enforce your patents on Amazon.
Okay.
So it's like, there's all this stuff. And honestly, that is the hands down the worst part of operating a business like that. Because then once you clean it up, you literally just play whack-a-mole for the entirety of the company.
Yeah.
Forever. So that's an important piece that those of you thinking of patenting things, you just have to, it goes with the territory. If it works, you just are going to have to accept the fact that's going to be a part of your life. From an acquisition standpoint, there were some things that we did really, really good. And there were some things that we failed at. One of the things that we failed at is we did not do a good enough job early on getting off of like the Facebook paid media teat. It was awesome early because we literally couldn't spend the money fast enough. That's how we grew so quickly. And it was super profitable because we had no employees. But in 2017, 18, when everybody and their mom had a Facebook account advertising something, including a lot of big businesses, like it got really expensive. And, that's been a slippery slope ever since. And because we could not figure out how to get our revenues off of those channels, it's like our revenues would grow, our profits came down, or they certainly weren't growing as efficiently as they were before. And it just got, combining that with the fact that like as a CEO of the company, I was spending a huge amount of my time dealing with lawyers. Sure. It just got not fun.
I get that.
And so we had companies and bankers reach out to talk about acquisitions years prior to that. And we didn't listen. And in 2020, we started listening. And we, had a conversation with the banker that represented a company that was interested in an acquisition. We went through the process, got a term sheet. Another private equity group, much, much bigger private equity group that had just bought Arctic Outdoors, called Windpoint Partners, came in. We were able to leverage them a little bit, which is always helpful when you're going through an acquisition. They closed super fast. It was a great transaction. They were great to work with. Honestly, they did everything that they ever said they were going to do, which is not generally what you hear about private equity transactions. And it was just time. We were ready to move on.
Okay. So you sell, you get out. I'm sure you took a year or two off, because I would. But what made you want to decide to get into software of all things? I mean,
I didn't want to. It happened accidentally. Same that I didn't want to get into consumer products. Like it happened. I mean, the timeline.
Ryan is using AI right now to build these software products, and it's pretty simple for him. But a year ago, you didn't just fall into software. You had to kind of you have to make it. So tell us how you got into it, I guess.
Yeah. So the Bottlekeeper transaction closed in March of 2021. Part of the deal was that I would stay on through the end of the year to oversee the transition, because they put us with Arctic Outdoors. Windpoint had just bought Arctic, so they paired us with Arctic. Arctic now makes Bottlekeeper products.
Okay.
And so that was the deal. So I was there through the end of the year. I did take some time after that, from guidance from a wise sage, like got into carpentry and using my hands, doing stuff differently that I absolutely love. And I mean, I'm in Montana, so I spent a ton of time in the woods doing woodsy things. And I got bored. I literally woke up one day and was like, I could feel my brain melting. Mm-hmm. It's like the most difficult decision I have the entire day is what to have for breakfast. And that's a problem. So I got, again, like permission from the wise sage to go and start doing something. So I reached out to a couple of companies that we had invested in, and my wife and I had invested in, and asked if I could help just anyway. Like, can I look under the hood, see where I can help? And they said yes. And I quickly realized they had no idea how to make money. And it wasn't because they were bad businesses or bad operators. They're incredible operators. I mean, one of them was a $20 million a business, 20 million a year business. They were profitable, but they didn't understand like the mathematical nuance between the operational finance side of the business and the customer acquisition side of the business, because they are completely dependent on each other, but they speak different languages. They use different math. They're different people running those things. So we did that really well at Bottlekeeper. We built systems internally on spreadsheets that answered those questions and told us how to use ad spend and told us how it needed to perform and told us if we were profitable, you know, on a day over day basis and what was working and not working. So I rebuilt some of those things in a much sleeker, sexier way inside of these companies, and it totally changed them. I mean, that 20 million a year business increased their net profit by 50% the following year because they knew how to spend ad dollars better. I mean, frankly, they just weren't spending enough ad dollars. They didn't know it because they didn't understand the math. But
so break the math down for us. Like what's difference between the client side and the business side and acquisition? Why did they have to spend more to get more? And how did you select your demographic of where you wanted to go based off of your spreadsheets? Are you looking in, like, I know a lot of bands will base their tours around where their Spotify plays are at. So they'll look and see where Spotify is getting hit. They can look on the back end, see they're getting traction in Chicago. Let's go to Chicago. Is that kind of the same principle as you're looking at the spreadsheets? You're saying, all right, this demographic, the Seattle market is killing it in this area. Let's focus more on this demographic, do our ad buys there. Is that really what the spreadsheets are for? Is just kind of reading through the tea leaves?
No.
Okay.
I didn't know that. That actually makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I just learned about that whole band thing too. I went and I saw this band called The Warning in Amsterdam, and I was talking to their manager, and I was asking him, I was like, "Hey, you guys never play Salt Lake City? What's going on?" They're a rock band from Mexico, and so I was like, "How come you guys never play Salt Lake City? Tons of Hispanic people in Salt Lake City, like huge hub for Mexican music and things like that." And he's like, "Oh yeah, well nobody in Salt Lake listens to us on Spotify, so, so we're just not coming." So I was like, "So yeah, so we're just not coming. Really we don't have enough numbers to justify doing a show there." And I was like, "Oh, well, anyway." I
mean, that makes a ton of sense. Would have never thought of that.
Yeah,
not in that world. So generally speaking, and I say generally because this applies to every business on the planet: ExxonMobil, your gardener down the street, the dry cleaner, and a SaaS company, and Bottlekeeper. It's the same math. You have expenses in the business. They're separated into buckets. They need to be separated into buckets. We as operators don't think of it like this, which is part of the problem. We have one bucket that is fixed expenses. Those are payroll. They exist whether or not you make money. Payroll, health insurance, office rent, legal fees, accounting fees, meals and entertainment, like all that stuff. Then you have variable expenses, and those are sales related expenses. Cost of goods, shipping and fulfillment to a customer, credit card fees on Shopify, marketing, advertising, all that stuff that drives revenue. Or when you make more money, you spend more of that money. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So within the variable, we also have paid media. We at Pentane looks at this differently. Paid media is also its own bucket, but that's because we use it as fuel. The challenge that companies have as a whole, certainly again, in that sub 50 million revenue, is that they go and devise ad budgets that are completely detached or unrelated to all the expense basis on the other side of in this other silo. So a business, and this is literally what we see. I mean, the first company that I got paid as an advisor to come in and help turn around, which was the real like aha moment. I rebuilt these systems and they went from losing 100,000 a month to making 50 a month in 3 months. And now they're up 300% revenue. They're crushing because they have this clarity. The problem is that if you're spending $1 million a month, let's simplify it. If you're spending $100,000 a month on payroll and fixed expenses and all those things, and your cost of goods, like your gross margin is 75%. And then all the other expenses that go with selling, shipping and fulfilling product, credit card fees is another 25%. You basically have 50% of every dollar you make left. That's called contribution margin. That word is horrifying to people. Like you can erase that from your memory. Contribution, but it is literally the answer to most questions. So that remaining 50% is what pays for this $100,000 of fixed expenses.
Sure.
If you don't have enough of that contribution margin, you have more expenses than you have contribution margin, you're losing money. If you have enough contribution margin, it covers your fixed expenses. What's left is your net profit. That's where net income comes from. So if the company is only spending $10,000 a month on advertising, in order for that advertising to return enough revenue to create enough of that remaining 50% to cover the $100,000 a month, I mean, they would have to generate $200,000 a month in revenue on a $10,000 ad spend, which is a 20x ROAS. That's not realistic. That is wildly unrealistic. So what they need to do right now, they're operating at a 10 ROAS and they think that's awesome, but they're still losing money and they don't know why. And the reason is because they're not spending enough ad dollars. They need to spend, $50,000 a month and their ROAS can come down to 4, and that's okay. That's good. Now they're driving enough revenue to create enough contribution margin to pay for the fixed expenses. Voila, now they're profitable. So all of what I just explained to you is really complicated, and I appreciate that. The point of Pentane is you don't actually have to do any of that stuff. It just tells you what to do.
So on the software level, you designed it where, say, someone like me who has a product I'm selling, I can go to Pentane. Am I uploading my spreadsheets to that, and then it's kind of scrolling through it and trying to figure it out, or is there a manual touch that you're putting into the equation? Are you doing
it's all automated.
Okay.
So in the 10-minute onboarding process, they click the buttons to connect all the APIs that they're using, their QuickBooks account, their Shopify, their Amazon, their Meta, their Pinterest, their TikTok, whatever. And then they answer a couple of questions about how their business is structured. What are they on, an accrual accounting or a cash accounting, which matters when you're trying to do financial things. And then it just tells them what to do. They put in what they want, their goal, where they want to be from a net margin standpoint. Do they want to be at break even? Do they want to be at a 5 or a 10 or 20%? They put that in and the system tells them what to do. It says you need to cut. They put in, I want to break even. It says you need to cut $12,000 a month out of fixed expenses, or you need to increase your conversion rate from 1.2 to 1.35, or you need to increase your ad spend to 72,000 at a 3.5 return on ad spend. Like, it's really, really directive.
Are there tools built in where they can just hit a button and do it? Or is it
not yet? But that's where we get into some really interesting AI down the road things.
Love it.
Yeah. I mean, that's where because we have APIs and all these things, there's a lot of data that the system will have access to, and being able to connect the here's what to do with the push this button and it gets done is a huge.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Huge
just being able to
step.
meld those APIs together to get the data in the first place isn't easy. So
APIs are about the worst thing on the planet, second only to dealing with intellectual property infringement.
And especially when you get it working and then they change something on you and you're like,
which happens all the time. Guys, do we need to update the APIs this frequently?
Yeah. It's like, here, break everything I worked on because you have to do something simple.
All right. Well, so let's try and go down a little bit of a journey here, which is, sort of around the idea of trying to give some people some actionable insights. We're talking a lot about the business and the software and getting into some really exciting stuff around Pentane and what you guys do there. But Pentane is basically a startup still. I mean, you said, there's basically no staff. There's, a product that you guys sell. And so I wonder if we could talk about just sort of bootstrapping a business from sort of start, from zero to something. Now obviously you had, some experience from prior businesses. Mm-hmm. You had even, maybe the very nugget of the software from some prior business. But I think a lot of people might have an experience like that where, I used to work somewhere and now I want to do that. Or, I created this product to help my friends and now I want to sell it. So I think people can relate to that bit of the process. But maybe from, I have an idea and I want to convert it into something, like what is, or maybe, and you might have some challenges specifically with jumping into a software business that you didn't have before, that maybe you could kind of talk about just sort of the general process. And I understand that this is a big question. So there's a lot to it, but I guess what I'm trying to get to the bottom of is sort of your approach. So when you go in and, you sort of outlined earlier that it might be kind of based on the scientific theory or scientific method, but if we can talk a little bit about just sort of like how you might approach a problem, and it might be a bridge too far to put together like a hypothetical, but if we could talk about it at least in the frame of Pentane, that would be great.
Yeah, I think it's a really good and important question, and will helps get people sort of off the couch and down their path towards whatever that startup is for them. I mean, look, the first thing, you have an idea, go find somebody that's interested in the idea and give them the idea for free. Don't build a software. Like, do it manually, do it personally. Is it a consulting thing? It's an advisory thing. Like, go help them solve a problem. And then get them to pay. If it's not them, someone else, get them to pay you for that problem. Creating software, even today in the world of AI, like creating deep mathematical models is expensive. Mm-hmm. That's changing rapidly, but it is even now. I mean, my cost on this product is probably a fifth of what it would have been 5 years ago. In a year from now, it'll probably be a 30th of that. But that's the reality of the changing AI world. I just think it's really, really important to go and prove that someone will give you money for that thing before you go and spend a bunch of time doing it. And I did that at Pentane. That was intentional. I went down the path of, I need to go use my brain. Let's go find a company that'll let me just use my brain a little bit. And in that, I found a problem. Problem was they didn't know how to make money. They didn't know how to pull the levers to maximize the money that they had the capacity to make. And I created a solution, and I did that for them for free. Now, to be fair, I was an investor in the company, so I have some incentive in there, but I didn't charge them for that work. And it worked really well. And then I took that and I had to go find somebody. Like the company that I went and helped, I didn't know them. I had to use my network and go find somebody and say, look, do you know any e-coms that are struggling that I might be able to go in and help with? And I found one that was willing to pay me a lot of money to advise them for 6 months and help them turn the company around. And there were some other things that I did, but like the big crux of that turnaround was implementing this system. And it worked incredibly well. So by the time that I went and started spending money on building a software, the math was already done. The systems were already in place. It was already proven out. We knew exactly what it needed to do. We just needed to convert that thing into something in the cloud.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we had our first functional product, like an actual functional product, in like 4 months, which is super fast for a full platform.
Well, and for your early draft, I know you said that it began life as spreadsheets and things like that, but sort of draft one, or if we were calling it like an MVP type product, I mean, was this like, I don't know, not slick, not anything? It was just, some kind of rough together forms that you fill out and populate, or was it as, I don't know, a kissing cousin to the final platform you have now?
No, it was awful. No, it was literally like clunky, super complicated, manual, error-prone spreadsheets.
That's so like we talked before the show that I'm relocating and starting a new job, and my job is quite literally going to be playing through spreadsheets. So I foresee me doing something very similar to this to just not only help them out, but to simplify my life, as someone who is in software and can see like the benefits of actually automating stuff and putting systems into place. They have systems in place for what they're doing. It's just antiquated. It's spreadsheets, and there's like 4 or 5 moving people. Like you've got the event department, you've got the planners, you've got the people fulfilling the event. You got all these different things, and they're all communicating through spreadsheets, and that just doesn't make sense. So I'm excited to kind of go in and see what their systems are and try and replicate something that.
And that's how a business gets born.
Exactly.
I mean, literally, that's it. You go in, you figure out how to solve some of those things, and you do it in a leaner, cleaner, cheaper, automated way. That's a company. I guarantee you, and you already know this, like there are other companies that have that same problem.
Yeah.
So that would happily pay to not have that problem.
Going into this, it's actually funny because the software platform that I've been working on for the last 4 years is right down this alley. So I can not only work on my own project, but I can implement it in a way that would work for this business that I'm going to go work for and solve their solution while creating my product at the same time. So I'm really excited about that.
That's awesome.
Well, so before we proceed, there are a couple things that you mentioned in your sort of first phase there that I just wanted to call out to people. First was this notion of, going and giving your product away first, or, sort of pressure testing your idea with, somebody like, trust, et cetera. So the idea was that you were intentional about going to, in this case, first a company that you'd worked with in the past or that you had a relationship with, and then second with a company that you didn't know. But in both cases, you were intentional that you were doing this actually as part of the business development process versus just, the example that Mike just gave is more like, I don't know, it's lucky, but it's not like he chose this job to facilitate being able to do this, right? It works out good, but it's not intentional in the same sense that like, I think people could go give a product away for free and then be abused for a long time and never turn it into a business.
Well,
that's just a hobby.
Right.
Look at Facebook or MySpace or all these places. They were a free platform to begin with, and then they monetized afterwards. They started as free. So get your concept out there, get people seeing it, and then build the revenue under it.
Yeah, and that's why I thought it was important to call that out, because I mean, I've heard people talk about it before, or to say that this is what you need to do is go out and test your idea, but I don't think a lot of people start there. I think they get excited about their idea or whatever, and then they just go to work, and I'm guilty of doing that too. The other thing that you mentioned specifically, and it was just kind of offhand, but also in order for you to find your second company that you started doing work with, you were leveraging your network. And I think that's one of those things that, I mean, we talk about a lot on this channel, which is, mentorship and things like that. And we try to do kind of a virtual mentorship through the show. But that's, being able to leverage your network is probably a pretty big factor in, trying to get reasonable feedback, gain access to opportunity to pressure test something in a low risk environment and so on.
Yeah. I mean, your network and who you surround yourself with is massively important. And, if you spend time building and developing that, which, let's be clear, does not generally happen at networking events. So be careful with that.
No, I think that's right. It's actually one of the things that I think is sort of a misnomer about things like, or platforms like LinkedIn and stuff too.
Yeah.
I think so much of your networking has to take place in real life. But like you said, it doesn't come through some manufactured thing or whatever, like any attempted inauthenticity. And I think it just kind of, doesn't help the network. Like you need to meet somebody because you met a guy and so a trusted friend introduced you to a trusted friend or something like that.
Yeah.
Those seem to be the relationships that really manage the test of time versus just, hey, you wished me happy birthday on LinkedIn and now we're close, I guess.
And then taking that a step further, who in your network works with the clients that you want to be your clients or that you think are your clients? That's what I did. I went to the network and went to someone that I know. I actually went to 3 people that I knew and I only worked on one of them who were outsourced CFOs. And I went and met with, I had coffee and tried to find an outsourced CFO that was working with e-commerce businesses. And I knew one, and he knew a company that was in trouble. And he, as the outsourced CFO, could help them fix their books, but he couldn't tell them what to do because he didn't have the experience to do that.
Sure. Yeah, no, I love that. So anyway, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to call out this couple of things because we sort of breeze through these things, I think, or take them for granted. And I think it's important that people to get a little bit more about that. So let's kind of pick up from, you vetted this product now, you went into the second company, you were able to sort of prove success a second time. Now you go, okay, I've really got something here. Now I want to monetize this or I want to turn it into a business. What's the next step look like?
So from that point, then it was find software developer, software development. I'm not a coder. I can code enough to fix some things sometimes and break things most of the times. ChatGPT has actually helped a lot with that. I'm a much better developer now with ChatGPT, but I found through a network, went to a guy who was a developer he wasn't the guy. I didn't know that till I met with him, but he knew somebody that knew a development shop actually here in Montana that sources students out of Montana State that are financial engineers, which is really unique. There's only a couple programs like that in the country. And that's
amazing that you're able to get it right. It's amazing that you're able to get it right where you're based and they're doing exactly what you want. That's really cool.
Yeah. And that's just lucky. Let's be honest. That's just lucky.
Sure. But even I think being able to put together the thought that you needed a financial engineer for this job versus just like, I don't know, going to your local development shop. Or getting on Fiverr and seeing who you can get to do it as cheap as possible or whatever, So
I do have a little bit of scar tissue. I have started more than 3 companies.
Sure.
One of those was an app around wine, like 15 years ago that was being made in India that through somebody that I knew. And so it was actually a relatively good process, but it was still not what I wanted to go and do this time. So being able to find something just in the US was my goal. The fact that it's local to me and we can have meetings in my conference room is wild.
That's awesome.
Super lucky.
Okay. So you start the development process, you start to put things together. Let's maybe zip forward a little bit to MVP or whatever we're calling him nowadays. I saw something about that term dying, but whatever version 1 of this platform is that you're running out. Let's talk about just sort of, okay, now I have a thing, but now you've got to do something with it. Like sort of what do you start to do with that thing?
Come on,
so the thing that we first created, it was very intentionally not sexy. It was highly functional. And I think from a software development standpoint, companies have a tendency to do that backwards. They go and spend money, go and raise money, go and spend money however they get it. and they build something that looks really nice, but it's not actually very helpful. So I wanted to do the opposite of that. The first product was not pretty. It was very functional. So from a customer acquisition standpoint, I did not and still do not want to build the revenue model on paid media, which is what Bottlekeeper was built on. That worked for its time. That no longer works. Not interested in playing that game. So our growth and go-to-market strategy was built entirely on partnerships. So it goes back to that, like, find the person whose clients you want to be your clients.
Well, so like in your industry specifically, I'm sure that your network, because of your success with Bottlekeeper and Shark Tank and all that stuff, I'm sure your network just kind of like opened a lot of doors in the last few years.
It definitely helped.
That. So that's an exception to the rule, but at the same time, it worked for you. So congrats.
It totally did. I mean, that's what I did. I went and had coffee with a friend that I've known for 10 years who owns a marketing agency. We were just having coffee. I didn't know that this would actually become a thing. I just wanted to show him what I was doing, and he's a cool guy. And when I showed him the thing, he exploded because I didn't know this. It makes sense to me now, but there's a problem inside of a marketing agency with its clients where the clients, like I said before, they have a tendency to arbitrarily create ad budgets that aren't tied to what the business actually needs. They're not providing enough fuel in the engine for it to have the chance of being successful. Well, who does that really impact? Marketing agencies. Problem, marketing agencies generally make their money off of how much budget you're spending. So they can't really come to you as a client and say, we need to 3x your ad spend. Well, one, they may not even know the math to do that. So set that aside. They just can't tell the client they have to spend more because they make more when they spend more. So it's this kind of incestuous problem.
Yeah.
Well, Pentane solves that problem as an independent third party using math and not emotion. So he glommed onto this. We formed a partnership. His agency, when I was working with it at Bottlekeeper 10 years ago, was 7 people in an apartment in Santa Monica. Now they're a $200 million a year. They have 400 consumer brand clients. They're huge, which is great. So we have gone down this partnership path that we're about a year into. But what I learned through that process of starting to implement the first version of Pentane into that agency is that and this is a mistake on my part, it's simple and useful and functional to me, it wasn't to anybody else. Like, it made sense to me, but it didn't make sense to anyone else because I deeply understand the math and how it's constructed. They don't. So it effectively became this like really cool thing that gave them information that they had no idea how to execute on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's a really great point, actually, because there are a lot of tools like this out there in the world, right, that can crunch numbers really well or whatever. But like, if you don't know what you're doing or you don't have any, real experience, like if I picked up version 1 of your platform, I wouldn't have the foggiest idea how to actually make it work or to even know that the data it was generating or the responses it was giving me were accurate. I would be like, okay, well, I guess. But and so or I guess you kind of turn a corner from being sort of this utilitarian version to something where you actually have to implement some user experience.
Exactly.
And start thinking about, how does a customer use this product? And marketing agency is an interesting one. That's what I do too, is run a marketing agency. And so as I'm hearing this, we actually don't do a lot of paid media, but we work with companies who do paid media. Yep. And you sort of touched on it, I don't think most of them actually even really know how to price this stuff. I think they just kind of throw out numbers and they'll just, what's your budget? You've got 30 grand. Okay, we'll run 30 grand worth. Yeah. I don't think there's a lot more to it than that. Maybe people start to give some ROI or this ad worked better than that ad. Like they start to give a few things down the road, as you go. But I think generally it's pretty unscientific.
So like the guy we had on the podcast last week, the guy that started that Swoop Scoop, the business where he goes around and cleans up your dog poop out of your yard, right? That business to me looks like it could be a direct benefit to something like this because it's the same principle. You want to double or triple or whatever your visits, your whatever the stops are. It almost seems like he could throw his numbers into your system, see where he's getting his return, and be able to open new demographics or markets based off of that. It just seems like a really interesting. It could fit into a lot of different business models.
Yeah,
not just ad buys for widgets you're selling online.
Totally.
It could work in the service department as well. Plumbers, anyone that's just trying to build their scheduling system up. If they can spend a little more on some marketing and hit it in the right spot that's actually working, that just seems like a win-win for everyone.
Well, and I think that's a big piece of it, right? I mean, so the guy Mike's talking about, his name's William Milliken. He owns a company called Swoop Scoop, and he actually began life as a marketer too. And so he probably would be looking for a tool like this, because the thing that it's solving, or the you mentioned it earlier, it's sort of direct action, is it actually tells you, you know, oh, you're underspending, or oh, you're overspending, right? And so, and I think that that's like the secret, or like the key that people don't realize. They don't know if they're spending enough or not enough. And it's risky to spend more if you don't really know that it's going to work out, right? So the fact that you've created sort of an algorithm or whatever for being able to tell how this works, you know, or be able to advise in sort of a repeatable way where it's actually based on, you know, your data, and then, you know, the performance of the advertising you're running and that kind of things. You're actually doing this number crunching to say, you know, I guess what as safe as you can be, that this recommendation is accurate. And if you know, add more money or pour more fuel on this, you actually will see that it comes back. Where I think a lot of people, that's such a risk, they end up always you know, I would imagine most of the time under advertising.
Yeah. It's, you know, the ad spend is, again, we look at it within the system as the fuel for the business, but there's this, it's important to take into account all the other things that are happening in the business, like adding new employees, adding new offices, you know, doing sales. All those things impact how you need to spend and how it needs to perform to achieve your outcome. And the challenge is that, again, as we've now talked at length, they're generally making up the ad budgets. They don't have a like clearly defined what good means. They just say, here's some money, please do good. And do good might mean they look at it a month later on their P&L when they get it and say, did we make money or did we lose money? And that's sort of their definition of good. But
they're looking at metrics like clicks and things like that, not necessarily, you know, they might get a CPM number or whatever it is, but they're not getting an actual, oh, well, you would have gotten more if you spent enough. Like there's almost like this tipping point or threshold where if you're underspending, you won't see the performance. If you're overspending, you won't see it either. So there's like this, you know, sweet spot in the middle that it seems like Pentane sort of bears out.
Yeah. I mean, all of those are pieces of the puzzle. They really are. They're just small.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not as important as some of the other pieces that having visibility on can completely change the way that you operate. Again, I'm going back to that scary word, contribution margin. Like we call them happy dollars because contribution margin is scary. Looking at the answer to the, like, is it working question is in contribution margin. If your new marketing campaign, your testing free shipping, your changes on your website, your whatever, like pick something. The answer to is it working or not is tracked inside of contribution margin. The challenge is you have to be able to track it. You need to be able to look at it on a graph and see a trend line that's either going up, yes, it's working, or it's going down over time. No, it's not working. Something's broken. So, I mean, those are all things that happen inside of Pentane. Those are inside the command center. And, you know, in addition to being able to really be guided on using ad dollars and being able to add discounts or price changes and see how the ad dollars and ROAS change, add expenses, change expenses, see how they change, all that stuff, change your net margin goal. In addition, you need go do those things, but you need to be able to see in real time how they're impacting the business. You can't find out whether or not it worked, you know, again, when you get a P&L in 6 weeks.
Right. Yeah. So to sort of round out, I guess, or take us through the rest of the journey up to where you are today, obviously this is still a young business. You know, we've talked a little bit about customer acquisition. We've talked about some of the things you're doing today. What about sort of, you know, I mean, your own marketing? So for one example, you know, you mentioned doing just networking and things like that, but, you know, you said that you sort of wanted to stay away from just sort of the, you know, using the platforms for doing your marketing. So how are you spreading the good word here? Second, how are you, you know, I mean, I know it's a really small company. So like, what's onboarding look like? I mean, are you sitting down with people and helping them implement, you know, what does this look like? And then sort of, I don't know if you know, or if you can talk to what's sort of the future of this and where you think it's going.
Yes. The current, how we are acquiring customers now is entirely built around partnerships. So there are two, I've tried this with a number of different entities or different types of entities, but there are two that are working well. One is marketing agencies and the other is lenders, like Shopify Capital style lenders, companies that lend money, do inventory financing, things like that for e-commerce brands. And the reason that is interesting and working well right now is because their underwriting pass rates, meaning the percentage of companies that actually pass underwriting that they were allowed to give capital to, they're down like 50% year over year. So those companies go and raise a bunch of money, kind of like a traditional private equity, and they have to deploy it, and they can't deploy it. So anything that some other tool, system, software, company, person can do to help companies coming to them get more healthy, and the result of which be able to deploy capital is positive. So we're getting a lot of really, really positive response from that. I'm doing the kind of classic screaming and yelling on LinkedIn when I have to. I did just launch a podcast because I think in the world of AI, authentic is really going to matter a lot. And I'm already seeing that. I'm on my third episode, and just being able to talk about this kind of stuff in real life with real people, I think is going to continue to be really, really important. So I'm right for Inc. I do try to get as much content and stuff out as I can. I think, there's a time and a place for paid media. I just don't want to build the foundational revenue model
based off of it.
No, I think that makes sense. Well, and I think you're right too, just to touch on the point about, authenticity and people understanding you're human. I mean, first of all, you're asking them to take a big leap of faith to trust your software and know that it's, accurate, effective. I think your story, just in talking to you here, it probably goes a long way in selling that, helping people understand that this is built on years of experience and through multiple exits and all these things. So it's probably good to be able to share those stories. So, and I think just, I don't know, as things become more and more artificial, and the world gets more and more noisy, I think we'll actually sort of retreat to the mean a little bit, which is, the time that's actually important is the time we spend with people. So
I think 100% agree with you.
I think it'll be interesting to see. I think the software, and Mike mentioned earlier, I've been using AI to develop some apps and stuff like that. And it's supercharging skills that I had very rudimentary skills. And it's not to say that I'm good at it now, but by leveraging these tools, I've taken a couple little applications from idea to being able to click the icon on my desktop, so for me that's a big win. And I'm a graphic designer by trade.
Extremely frustrating.
For Mike,
I've spent 4 years trying to learn this stuff, and he hits a button and it does it.
I just ask it to help me and it does it. Meanwhile, Mike's like, come on, bro. So anyways, but I think that's good. But one last thing that I just kind of wanted to touch on, we're getting sort of near to the end here. But you mentioned earlier, and I just wonder if this is something you could lean into, or maybe, and maybe you can just be like, nah, I already know what I was going to do. But so you mentioned at the end of getting rid or exiting Bottlekeeper, there was, you took a little bit of time off, and eventually you sort of noticed that your brain was wanting, and you felt like you needed to do a little something. And, upon the permission of your mentor, significant other, some wise sage in your life, you decided, hey, it's time to kind of get back into the game and start looking at stuff again. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about this, just sort of philosophical, I guess, but sort of about finding one's purpose and making sure you're doing the things that you want to be doing. And the reason I ask is because it seems like the businesses that you've participated in, this one came out of your experience, mostly Pentane, but it seems like a little bit of, this seems like a good opportunity. Let me chase it down. They don't necessarily seem like passion projects. Like you weren't, passionate about, keeping your beer cold on the beach, although the red Solo Cup does suck. And in California, my God, I don't know how you even get a bottle onto the beach. So, this is probably more an act in obfuscation than anything. But but I wonder if you could just talk about in that moment, sort of having achieved something in life, whether, so if I'm relating this to people who might be listening to the show, maybe right now there's a lot of layoffs in the news. So maybe people who are, losing jobs and trying to decide what to do, and looking for purpose or trying to figure out what's next. How do you advise, or what's your experience in terms of just trying to find your purpose and figure out where to go next?
Yeah. Being able to clearly define for you what the priorities are is mission critical. And I didn't do that accidentally. I did that from scar tissue. That medical device company was brutal. I could not get away from it. And leaving that, and to be fair, like it was also a horrific environment with like borderline psychopaths. Like it was a beautiful thing at the beginning that became very ugly. So it was a big thing to get out of. It was a big deal to move on from that situation. The scar tissue that I developed from that is why we built Bottlekeeper the way that we did. My deal with my cousin Matt was I will come in eventually, like over months of him, poking me to do this. I will come and do this, but we are not going to manage people. I want to run this business on the internet from anywhere in the world.
Love it.
And that guardrail was really strict because it was emotional. It was my emotional guardrail. I didn't have kids at the time. My wife and I have been together since college, so we've done all this stuff together. Neither of us had traveled. We had never been out of the United States outside of Mexico, and I don't think that really counts. So we wanted to be able to travel. So we did. That was a guardrail. It was a really, really strict guardrail because that was my defined priority. And so when you do that, the hardest thing going through that is as things start to work, opportunities open up left and right. And you have to be able to say no to them if they violate your guardrail.
Yeah.
And that's something that we did really well because at the time, Katie and I were spending 4 or 5 months of the year out of the country, gallivanting about the world because I could operate the business with internet.
It's guardrails.
Yeah, and now I have kids. And I mean, that adds a whole nother set of guardrails. And I'm just extremely sensitive to how and where I spend time, knowing that every minute that I dedicate and commit to doing something else is a trade that I'm trading for time with my kids. And they're 3 and 6, and they're only going to be 3 and 6 for so long.
I love that. I love that you make that a priority to stay within what you are willing or comfortable to do, because a lot of people just see the dollar signs. Oh, this is going to pay off a lot. We're going to make, 5 times what we made last year, whatever. Let's do it. But the whole time they're pulling their hair out, they're stressing, they're going to die of early, a stroke or something, just because they're so overwhelmed doing something that they probably should have never gotten into in the first place. And knowing that you should just say no to some things and having the ability to do it. There's something to be said for that, something to be said for just having the finances to be able to say no to something that when a good quote unquote opportunity comes up, and being able to realize that, hey, this isn't worth the reward. So no, you should check this guy out. He might be available. And
there's always a cost.
Yeah.
There's always a cost.
And I think what I like about it, or how I like to frame it, is maybe like, you are allowed to give yourself permission, just as being a human being, you are allowed to give yourself this. Now, I understand people will have hard financial situations. They'll, maybe have a job they don't love or whatever. But you can start to set these boundaries, and the next job you take, maybe it'll be a little more respectful of that boundary, or maybe whatever. So, I mean, it can be a constant improvement, but I think it starts with understanding that you have some agency in your life and you're allowed to set up these kinds of rules, even if it feels like you're just kind of, doing the man's bidding. If you actually stop and reflect, you can take a minute to try and, I don't know, configure your life a little bit more in the way you hope.
Yeah. And I think you have to. I mean, let's make that not optional. It's hard. Yeah. You'll learn how to do that because it can massively change your life and produce much better outcomes.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and it's cliche, people always say chase your passions and things like that. And I know sometimes it's hard for us, or maybe you can't even identify your passion, but I think it's important to be able to at least give yourself permission to chase something that makes you happy. So anyway, so I appreciate you sharing that with us. So cool. Well, we're kind of at that time. So do you just want to give people a quick rundown where they can catch up with you online if they want to check out the product over at Pentane? Anything else you want to share? Your new podcast, maybe?
Yeah. Pentane is pentane.com. You mentioned onboarding earlier. It's super easy. It takes 10 minutes. Today, I help you with that. So you're working with me directly. Click some buttons. In a month or 2, it'll take 5 minutes and you'll do it yourself.
Nice.
So yeah, you can find us there. You can book a demo. It's all revenue-based pricing, so it's pretty simple. You can find me on LinkedIn. I do have a podcast called Growth Mavericks Podcast that is part tactical entrepreneurship stuff and part what are the things you do in your life to become durable so you can live through the entrepreneurial stuff. I think that's really important, which we've spent, a big part of the last 10 minutes is that. Like, how do you build the structure in your life to do it and be able to stick through it, because those outlier events are generally around the corner. And if you can make it there, it makes a huge difference. So that's Growth Mavericks Podcast.
Love it. Cool. Well, thanks, Adam. Really appreciate your time. I learned a lot.
No, thank you guys. This is great.
Yeah, much appreciated. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. And we'll see you guys next time.